everyone. My name is Vina, aka Miss WOC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. So I'm sorry if you can hear the fan in this. Unfortunately, it's just really hot and humid, so I need to keep it on because it really is just unbearable. Today I wanted to get into my June reading wrap-up. June was a pretty hectic month for me. It was just dealing a lot in my personal life, and then it was really hot, and that was just making me extra slumpy. I've been feeling like on and off slumpy all year, but then with the heat and then all the stuff going on that made me unable to concentrate on books. Yeah, I didn't get to read everything that I wanted to read in June, but I still read some great stuff, so let's get into it. The first thing that I read during the month of June was When It All Syncs Up by Maya Maya. You may recall that this was on my 2023 most anticipated books list that I made back in December, and unfortunately this one just didn't hit the mark for me. So we're following Aisha, who is a ballerina attending a prestigious ballet school in Canada. Well, actually, I think it's just a regular boarding school, but it has a really good ballet program. She's trying for this summer intensive and she ends up not getting in, even though she clearly has talent, because ballet is just very white and they have a certain look they want you to look as a ballerina. So after being unable to get into the summer intensive, she calls up her dad on the phone and she's just like, I'm gonna go stay with a friend for the summer. And I just found that kind of weird, because I'm like, the way he just easily consented to that, because at first he's accusing her of liking this guy as more than friends, and her father is working overseas in Japan to help pay for all these expenses of this prestigious school. So he agrees to let her not only fly to this new to the other side of Canada, but then also stay with this old friend, even though he thinks that they are in a relationship. And he's like, I can't come home till December. And knowing that she has all these issues previously that the book gets into about with bulimia and trying to keep her weight down because of ballet, and then she has some issues with her mom, who was enforcing the strict diet on her. For me, this book just didn't hit the mark because there were so many different ideas the author had and different things that she wanted to bring up, but none of it was given enough page space. Everybody in this book had their own trauma, and we, excuse the pun, danced around it for most of the book, and then wanted to address it towards the end, which just doesn't work. And it's a formula I find a lot of YA doing lately, and it's just not hitting the mark like it should, as there's just so much build up, and then everything races towards the end. And I don't know if it's because everybody's following the save the cat method, but it's just, you can't try and deal with these hard-hitting topics and then not give them enough page space. We mention various things. We mention, eating disorder. The best friend has an abusive father. There's one character who was sexually assaulted, and it's not actually even, the words aren't actually even said on page, which that kind of bothered me too, because we were pushing so hard for this romance that I feel like takes up the majority of the book, when Aisha should really be discovering herself. She decides to go to this performing arts school that her friend is going to, and it's a lot more diverse, so at first she feels more comfortable there, but then she realizes that the ballet program has the very same issues of being overly white. And while at this performing arts school, one of the reasons why she's happy to go there is because she sees black faces there, but then she doesn't connect with any of the black people or at least attempt to, until the very end. So that was kind of weird too, because we had more characters of color here, but still the same problem where the black person is pretty much the only black person in the space trying to navigate everything. And also, yes, ballet is very white. That's been very well established. However, there are people working within the industry to give opportunities to young girls, and I don't feel like that was really talked about either. So there are things like Brown Girls Do Ballet, which has been around for I think about 10 years at this point. It's big on social media. Hundreds, if not thousands, of young brown ballerinas have connected through there. They offer mentorship, they offer scholarships, they just offer a way for these young dancers to be able to connect with people who look like them when they're trying to navigate a world that is very white. So one thing that comes up in the book is that she didn't know there was a diverse dance company in Canada. But in this day and age of social media, why wasn't that being put on a radar? One thing that I don't understand with current YA is they don't like to touch upon social media, even though it's such a big thing in our world right now. And also, she ends up kind of being more drawn towards contemporary, which is also an issue that arenas always talk about, is that they constantly get pushed when they're black to go towards contemporary dance instead. So I don't like that we were pushing that as the solution either. Even though, yes, there was like a lot of trauma that she had to deal with ballet. I don't like the way topics were addressed at the surface level here, and we didn't have the more in-depth conversations that deserve to be had. After When It All Syncs Up, I read The Thing About Home by Rhonda McKnight. And I don't always go for this type of book. It was more on the inspirational side, and it is women's fiction. We're following a social media influencer. She planned her dream wedding vow renewal ceremony, and then like at the last minute her husband comes to the church and he says like, I can't do this. I thought I could do it. I cannot. I'm not going to be able to walk down that aisle and essentially remarry you today. And so after that, she ends up going home and having a complete meltdown on social media. Like really bad, ugly crying, makeup running, stripping off her dress. It was like terrible. She's like losing followers by the thousands who think she's just a spoiled brat. And so after that meltdown, she decides, she needs to go on her kind of like eat, pray, love type journey. And one thing that her husband had actually been pushing her to do was go reconnect with your family. Like she doesn't know her father's side of the family because her father died before she was born, and then it's just always been her and her mother. And her mother is a bit of a controlling momager. So she decides to escape to South Carolina low country and find her family. She finds that they own this huge farm down there, and they're trying to help her be a part of this year's harvest. So along the way, she kind of discovers pieces of herself that she didn't know she had. She finds new passions. She enjoys great food because she's always been working as a model, and then as an influencer, she hasn't been able to enjoy food the way they enjoy food down there. And she also kind of heals some of the traumas that she had from her marriage, because she does realize she and her husband had not gotten along for so long, and they're not in love, and she wasn't devastated by the idea of her marriage ending so much as like because of loving him. She was just devastated by like the appearance of it ending. And she has like a cute little love interest who has a single daughter, she has a cute little love interest who is a single father to a young daughter, and he works on the farm with her grandmother, and he has these huge plans of buying an old plantation and restoring it and creating a bed and breakfast. So she's finding out all these new things and, just connecting to the Lord, which is something that she also never had in her life. As her family is very religious, but she never went to church before, so all of this is completely new to her. It was an interesting story about food, family, and reconnecting to your roots. Then I read Nightmare Island by Shakira Bourne. So, Nightmare Island is different than her first book, Josephine Against the Sea, which was or just like a regular contemporary. This one is more of a horror, and it's a horror from the eyes of a child who is a horror film buff. And she wants to be a filmmaker when she grows up, so she's kind of telling the story, she's like, in a way where she's saying, oh, well, if I were to set up this scene, it would go this way. So I think kids who do like those types of movies are going to enjoy that aspect of it. This one was a little slower for me than Josephine Against the Sea, which I found a little bit more humorous and fast-paced. And it's kind of a slow build as we follow this girl. Her brother is having nightmares. Her parents just up and decide to whisk him off on this vacation to this island by themselves. They leave her behind at grandma's, and then when she realizes where they are, she takes a boat to the island, comes upon this weird clinic that they're staying at, and realizes everything's not as it seems. There's some like weird freaky creatures running around, and they just need to get off this island. So I said it was a little bit slower paced for me. It took me a minute to connect into it. I do like that it pulled from Caribbean folklore, and like I said, it was really unique in the way it was told. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of Shakira Bourne stuff. So I read Farmhand Volume 4 by Rob Guillory, and there's not a whole lot I can say about this one because it is Volume 4. I've been reading Farmhand all year. This was the most recent volume, so I'm patiently waiting for the next volume. And the issues in this one were a little bit slower as we got some key reveals, and it was kind of building up towards the end of the series. So I'm really curious now that everything is out there what direction the final few issues are going to go in. Then I read a series of picture books. So I read All Good in the Hood. This is by Dwayne Reed and Gladys Jose, and this was a fun one. It's always great when I see picture books with black boys as the main character, especially when they're written by black male authors. We just don't get enough books out there for young black boys. So this one, I'm very happy that I'm going to be able to pass this along to my nephew. I haven't really had the chance to pass it to him yet. But this follows these two brothers, and they're hanging out in their neighborhood during Juneteenth. There's like lots of scary sounds sometimes in the neighborhood, but the oldest brother is assuring his younger one that it's all good in the hood. There's like great things to experience. There's so many nice people, and we show how the community gets together to celebrate Juneteenth. And books like this I feel like are really necessary because the hood always gets such a terrible rep because of violence and crime, but not enough stories highlight the good things about the community as well and how people come together despite everything. So I think this is something that some kids can see, oh, my neighborhood's not that bad as everybody says, but also it's just beautifully illustrated, like great illustrations. Like I said, black boy representation that is very necessary. And yeah, this was just a really fun, quick read. I also read Joy Takes Root. This one is by Gwendolyn Wallace and illustrated by Ashley Curran. And we're following a little girl who is learning to garden from her grandmother. I'm not a gardening person. I'm not a plant person. But I think this is very relatable to a lot of people. I'm a city girl, so I didn't grow up in any type of farm area or any type of big area with a garden. My mom's always had one, but I never really went out there and helped her. She learned to garden from like her mother and grandmother, and it's really something that a lot of people do pass down to their children. So this grandmother is passing down the tradition of gardening to her granddaughter. She's explained to her how it connects them to their ancestors. She's showing her all the different foods that you can grow. I said, I'm not a gardening person. I did watch my mom gardening a little bit growing up, but that's just not for me. But I thought it was still pretty cute to see their connection to each other. And I also read Boogie in the Bronx. So that is by Sol Ecanto and Janet Glatt, as well as Jackie Azua Kramer. So this one was a cute one. It was a very vibrant picture book. This one I read as an e-arc, and it's a rhyming book where we're following different groups of people dancing and having fun in the Bronx, and it's just gonna be a lot of fun. Like, I can easily see the kids enjoying it. I also read Asha and the Toymaker, and that one is by Mangal Sashi. Asha and the Toymaker is about a little girl in India, and her father makes toys. She wants to help him get them sold, but he wants her to stay focused on her schoolwork. So she kind of goes behind his back and paints the toys all different colors, and then they catch the attention of like people buying in the streets, and they help keep his business booming, because he gets like an increase in business. And then he kind of realizes, okay, you were right. Like, I did need to paint them, and I want you to help me as long as you get your schoolwork done. And I thought the author's note was interesting because she kind of talked about how she didn't have to do it. There are a lot of people who don't get the opportunity to go through school because they have to take part in the family business and help their parents make money. I read the third book in the Spooky Sleuths series by Natasha Dean and Lissy Marlin, and it's called Don't Go Near the Water. In this one, the students went on a class field trip to the research center. So they take a boat out into the ocean, and while they're out there trying to study marine life, they notice something strange in the water. Like, one person thinks it's a selkie, another person thinks it's a seal. And the interesting thing about this series is they use the scientific method to try and figure out what's actually going on as weirdness happens around town. Oh, this is book 3. I did skip over book 2 because my library hold came in, and there is like a piece that does carry over from book 2. So definitely a series that needs to be read in order. It didn't impact me too much, but I know for the younger kids, they need that piece. And this pulls from Guyanese folklore, but I also like that we were addressing the main character's other heritage and talking about Selkie folklore as well. So there's this mysterious woman they see in the water around the research center. Weird things start happening to the men. They keep finding themselves drawn to the water, and they have to figure out what's going on with this lady. They think she's a fairy maid, and they need to get rid of her. So it's a quick chapter book, very good for beginner readers, and I think they'll. Then I read Empire of Hanging Swords by R.R. Egal. So I've mentioned this book before. I actually read it as a beta reader in January of 2022. So it's been a long time since I read it, and of course it's changed around a little bit. After beta reading it, there was a lot of stuff that I really liked about it. So I did end up becoming friends with the author, and I was happy to see her decide to self-publish this book anyway, even though the intention was originally to traditionally publish it. And I think that like people who are looking for an epic fantasy romance are going to enjoy this. She really did put in the work to create an original Parthenon, and reading it again after not reading it for like over a year, it was like discovering it all over again. So I was like really enjoying the attention to detail and work that was put into creating an original Parthenon, because so often in stories where there are gods, people just kind of sprinkle in the gods like window dressing, not acknowledging that this is a religion people actually practice. There are different traditions and rituals that pertain to that. And there's also plenty of court intrigue and political intrigue in here that I thought was really well done. So it is like an enemies to lovers situation. We are following Nefret, and she is the empress of this huge empire, and she is running this empire. Her father ends up getting killed. She's still trying to deal with her grief when she finds out that it could possibly be one of her allies who killed him. So she like races across to the other side of the empire to confront the Dominus of Theron. When his son can't stand her, like he would be happy to see her dead, and she is definitely ready to see him dead as well. But as she's trying to enact her revenge, she comes to find out there's a bigger conspiracy at play, and they have to work together before his father is the next one killed. And I like the enemies to lovers aspect here, because it felt like a true enemies to lovers. Like they hate each other, they're trying to kill each other. There are many attempts to kill each other, but they have to work together and learn to be friends. It doesn't go from 0 to 100. They slowly work towards being able to trust each other as they go on this quest around the kingdom to defeat a common enemy. I don't normally read poetry collections, but I read Plantains and Our Becoming by Melania Louisa Marte, and I actually first heard of her because she did the audiobook for Clap When You Land. So Elizabeth Acevedo put me onto her, and then watching some of the stuff around the launch, I found out that she does her own poetry, and a lot of her stuff was online. So there are some of her stuff that's online that is in this collection. So there were a few that I had heard before, and I thought it was great because it was like the first part is just like memoir type, where she's reflecting on her own life and her own experiences from childhood to adulthood. And I thought that like the poems in that section were just like really, really impactful and also very relatable, especially since she is relating to being both a Black woman but also the daughter of Caribbean immigrants, and being caught between those two worlds of identifying like as a Black American woman, but also she has moved back to Dominican Republic and spent some time living there, so she has that viewpoint, which kind of moves into part 2 and 3, where she really explores what it means to be Dominican, the issues they have with colorism there and Black identity, as well as anti-Haitian sentiment, and also how and what we can do to work towards that. And then the third part is a lot of different things inspired by pop culture. Like she has a poem inspired by Cardi B, and she has a poem inspired by Amara La Negra, and there's just so many different things she pulls from in pop culture to relate to or to further expound upon based upon the ideas and the discussions around these people. And I just found that all very interesting. Even if you're not a poetry collection person, she also has a great voice, so I think you should at least get the audio and listen to it, because it really will make you think. And last but not least, I read Rhythm and Muse by India Hill Brown. So I know she's a former booktuber. I heard great things about her first 2 books, which were middle grade. So this is interesting, seeing her take on a YA romance. I did read it in a day, so it was very readable, but I wasn't like totally sold on this one. There were some things I really loved about it. I like that we are following Black children who live down south, and their families go to church every single week, and religion is an important part of their lives, and they pray before meals. And I've mentioned this so many times on my channel, but that's just not something that we see a lot. Some people can call it Christian propaganda if they want to. This wasn't a Christian book per se. It's just that the characters happen to be Christian, which is a reality for a lot of Black people, especially down south. So I like that that part was addressed, like that they were openly involved in the church, even having been in the church choir. And it was interesting because this one was centered around a Black boy, which there's not a lot of YA contemporary romance where a Black boy is the main character. We're following Darren in a somewhat of a Cinderella retelling. So he is like in love with this girl, Delia, who has her own podcast. That is his dream girl. She's doing a songwriting contest to come up with her theme song, and he, even though he's a great singer, he doesn't like to sing because of some incidents in the past where he really embarrassed himself. So he anonymously decides to enter this contest, and while he enters this contest, he's also trying to get to know her as a person and become friends with her. I mean, it was a little weird because he does know so much about her from following this podcast, like a lot more than she knows about him. So I wish they would have spent a little bit more time on page together. That way we could really figure out what it is that she like attracts her to him as a person. Also, this was only single POV, and I would have loved a dual POV just to get her perspective, because it was a little bit of a harder sell when we don't know what she's thinking. And I think for romance, I just prefer the dual POV perspective. But it was cute. Like I said, there was stuff I liked about it. It was a little bit slow for me. And it said I wanted them to spend more time together. He spends a lot of time like in his head daydreaming about the idea of her. Not quite manic pixie dream girl, but kind of towing the line a little bit. So I would have just loved just a little bit more there. But I am interested in reading like some of her other work, because I know that's like more horror, and maybe that might be more of India's style. So that was everything that I read during the month of June. Let me know if you read any of these, or if any of these sound interesting to you. And as always, if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!